This is Business Therapy, healing businesses from the inside out through communication and emotional intelligence. I'm Diane Dye Hansen, management consultant, and with me co-host Christine Salvo, therapist, certified mediator, and certified hypnotherapist.
Good morning. Hello, everyone.
Good morning, everybody. So today we are talking about the different type of intelligence. So when I grew up with IQ tests.
Right.
I grew up with take the test and then we'll put you in this class based on IQ, et cetera, and so on. What they don't test you in school is emotional intelligence. At least I never ran across it. Have you?
Actually, it's kind of funny. So when I was in school, absolutely not. but actually modern day, absolutely. It's actually part of curriculum in elementary schools, even where we live. And then it goes up into middle and high school as well. So there's a lot more emphasis on emotional intelligence for our children. It's definitely being nurtured a lot more in schools. And it's my take that it was a big part of the anti-bullying movement.
Very good. So it's a really positive effect of that movement is to become more aware of yourself and others. So maybe we should just for our listening audience define what emotional intelligence is.
So I got this from a Psychology Today website, and it says emotional intelligence is the ability to identify and manage one's own emotions as well as the emotions of others.
Oh, yeah. So that's interesting. So there's a couple of different components of this. And prior to this episode, Christine and I took a facial recognition test.
Yeah. We tested our own emotional intelligence according to this website.
50% of the emotional intelligence is the ability to read people and know, if what they're feeling and whether your, basic responses to that emotion are appropriate or not, right? So
basically.
So we're going through this litany of faces, and you know what? Some of them I could spot, but some of them were really challenging.
Mm-hmm. They were pretty tricky.
Compassion versus sadness for me was one that really stood out. Like when someone's having compassion or having empathy, and when someone's feeling sad themselves, that was rough for me. And the other one was I think the ones that I had the trouble with were the degrees of. So satisfaction versus love. So apparently I'm running around thinking everyone who's just satisfied with me loves me.
And you know what? I don't think you should change that. Run with it. If that's what you think, run with it.
No, you're not satisfied with me. You love me. You are not satisfied with your service. You love my service.
Exactly.
It's great. It's important. How about you, Christine? Where were your challenges?
I was a little caught off guard when I first started taking because I wasn't prepared for the facial recognition either. So it was like, okay, when does this quiz change? And it actually never did. So I was getting a couple disgust and anger, because those had very similar facial features. They were very subtly different. And I also got caught up with the satisfied and love, because the satisfied, it was actually a very pleasant look on the person's face, but it didn't really look like love. Like, I feel like love has a softness to the eyes, like is different, but this person looked pretty happy. But yeah, I got tripped up on a couple for sure. And I found it interesting too, because I think that when we're really looking at emotional intelligence, we can take our best guess as far as facial recognition. Yeah. And, it's almost funny to me that that's how they decided to do this quiz, because in the therapy practice I do, I'm often going like, you can't just read your partner, even if you've been together 15 years.
Yeah.
You don't know what's actually going on behind the eyes. And in fact, sometimes our assuming or taking a facial recognition and then interpreting it gets us in a lot of trouble.
Exactly. So part of emotional intelligence really is having the courage to ask the question, and sometimes ask the uncomfortable question about the behavior.
I like to say things like, you look really excited right now. Am I getting that right? What's going on? Right? Because that for everyone, it's a little bit different too. And I would say for females, typically we're more expressive than our male friends. And so we, as females, and I see women get in trouble with this all the time. I know that you're mad. I know you're mad. And they're like, what? No, I'm not. Yes, you are. That look on your face, but it's only one of maybe 5 looks where we have a gamut. We have many, many, many expressions that we've been taught that it's okay to use. So definitely checking in. And so even if you see it, that's actually our cue to be more curious.
Yes, a cue for curiosity, a facial expression of that you can't quite put your finger on, or there's no words to it. Really, it's a silent anger or a silent, just a look of what you perceive as anger, but may not be. And yeah, I mean, there is a certain look that I can see that triggers physical responses in my body of run away, girl. And sometimes I can see that response, but it's not aimed at me. So this is the interesting thing. So the emotion might be there, like that might be the base emotion. It's anger that does this to me. So anger might be the base emotion, but it's not directed at me. But I will still have that run away because of my conditioned response to anger. So how can people who have those conditioned responses, maybe they think a boss is angry, maybe they think maybe someone thinks that they're someone else that they care about is feeling a certain way. What process, Christine, can they go through to recognize, maybe pause?
Mm-hmm. So the number one thing when it comes to emotional awareness, emotional intelligence, that I recommend is absolutely take a pause and do some self-evaluation. We actually can't speak, like I like to say, eloquently until we're in touch with what we want to say. So if I come at you and I'm just angry, well, I'm going to say all sorts of stuff because, I want to unload all of this extra energy I have. But it's not going to go anywhere. I actually had a session earlier today where I said, listen up. When you're angry, people's ears get real small. But when you tell people how you feel, they get real big. So we respond naturally as humans, males and females, to feelings. If you say, I feel left out, well, we've all been there. I want to help you solve this problem. But if I come at you and say, you left me out with some intensity and some anger, my ears are getting real small. I don't care that I left you out at that point. Now I'm getting ready to do the same thing as you, which is whatever your conditioned response is. So
Right.
their conditioned response might be, let's fight. Yours is, I'm out. And everybody's is a little bit different. Sometimes it's a combination. Sometimes it's pretty cut and dry. So awareness is key. So it's like, hey, this person's getting angry and I'm getting triggered. So emotional intelligence, remember 50% is other people, but I think really the most important 50% is yourself. If you can't manage and understand yourself, you're going to be really, 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 it's going to be difficult to deal with other people. Because if we can't manage ourselves, how in the world can we be helpful really to other people?
Right,
So
exactly.
when your initial response is when somebody's angry, even if it's not directed toward me, I become, and then you need to fill in those blanks. And then you can also say that, in situations where you feel like you're not equipped. So what I'm kind of hearing when you say, when somebody's angry, I want to run, that actually tells me that you're not equipped with tools where you feel confident enough to de-escalate the situation. So typically what I do in situations like this is I say, well, guess who's going to get really good at conflict management?
Yep.
Because it's not a matter of you get to run every time and we can't escape problems. And people are going to get angry. We all get angry. Everybody gets angry. So it's a matter of, okay, anger really triggers me. I need skills. And that is that other part of emotional intelligence. So we don't just throw stuff on top of it, bunch of rugs on it and hope it goes away. We uncover it and we go, I have an issue with this. It's not their issue with this. How can I approach it in myself and then ask for my needs to get met from somebody else?
Right. And Inc. magazine addresses this as well, this thinking about the feelings. They say emotional intelligence begins with what is called self and social awareness, the ability to recognize emotions and their impact in both yourself and others. You ask questions like, what are my emotional strengths? What are my weaknesses? How does my current mood affect my thoughts and decision making? And what's going on under the surface that influences what others say or do? And then that can be used for
Mm-hmm.
valuable insights that can be used to your advantage.
Absolutely.
I'm go back to the angry boss example. Boss is angry, boss is triggered. One of you has a choice in that moment. And in order to actually, both of you have a choice. You can de escalate yourself from being triggered if you have the tools, and you get to choose how to respond to a trigger. But the person who is triggered has less control at that point because of the trigger, because of the blinders that slap down
Yeah.
when you're triggered. So
Mm-hmm.
so a triggered boss is a triggered boss. And this is my personal tool for working with someone who's triggered is I'll let them have their little trigger blow for a little bit, and then I'll say, "Wait, just 1 second. Can we pause for one moment, both of us? And here's what I hear you saying, and here's the reality behind the trigger." I've had to do this in several circumstances where people are feeling lost or hopeless about something, or are frustrated, or maybe they're not even frustrated with something that we're working on. They're frustrated with something that just happened just before our meeting, and they're carrying that energy in. So sometimes I'll notice that someone's
Mm-hmm.
carrying the energy in. Is I say, well, I noticed you're carrying a little bit of energy into our conversation here. So let's work for a moment to clear that out
Mm-hmm.
so we can move forward with what we need to do with a clear slate. And that's,
Right. And that's being receptive.
yeah, exactly. And I think
Yeah.
people appreciate that as well.
Mm-hmm.
is um is listen, I know that your company is growing, you've got a million things hitting you at once, COVID is happening right now, all the stage changes, everything that's happening, that's keeping a lot of things in flux right now. And let's just take one moment and do a few belly breaths. Breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth, fill your belly like a balloon, do that 3 times. Okay, is there anything that you are working with now that is going to be helpful to our engagement right now? Is there anything that's you're learning that you can bring in, or can that stay at the door so we can address what's
Mm-hmm.
here?
So in essence, clearing the state.
Yeah, clearing the space, keeping the space a safe space for communication on anything that needs to
Mm.
be communicated, and then holding the container for
Yeah.
for the conversation, and realizing that that container is labeled this topic, not everything else out there. Now if it's so overwhelming that it's everything else out there, maybe the best use of our time is to help you process this, if
Mm-hmm.
that's the my role in the conversation. Sometimes people need to process.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
better say that right as a therapist. So when you're talking about your process of emotional intelligence, it's really, to me, what I'm hearing is you take the time to go slow. And that's a really important piece here, because just as you said, we're all switching hats as fast as we can. We're off to this, we're off to that. Now we're soccer mom. Now we're over here. We're the wife, and now we're whatever the case, whatever the hats. And typically, an issue in emotional intelligence is not going slow enough and checking in, not only with others but with ourselves.
Right.
So when you're tapped in and tuned into you, you're going to be more receptive. And you can at least, one of my biggest favorite things to tell people is just say it out loud. We can all deal with it. If you say, I am stressed to the max, I was late coming here, I need 5 minutes before I contribute, but I'll listen and take notes. I don't really care what situation you're in. We've been there.
Yep.
But it's when When we keep our mouths closed and then we act out instead, and all of a sudden you get called on, you're flustered, you're not ready, and then you say something you don't mean, or you're curt, or your tone is off. And then all of a sudden it creates all these bigger problems for you. So emotional intelligence, one of the big movements with it is helping people navigate that space of like, hey, it's okay to say I'm running late. It happens to everyone. Or there was an obstacle in the way, or I just didn't get a good night's sleep last night. It happens. But if we can't communicate where we are, how we feel, and what we're going through, no one else it's not their job to mind read that. And so they will look at your performance, they will look at your attitude, and there's sometimes a lot of cleanup that has to happen. There's a lot of wreckage that happens when we're not practicing emotional intelligence for ourselves and for others.
Right, right. And that wreckage, it starts to build on itself. Just gets worse and worse and worse until really we decide that we're sick and tired of the wreckage, and either we quit or we get emotionally intelligent about it. So it just comes full circle there.
So one of the ways that you talked about is processing. So emotional intelligence, it's obviously not the only way, but therapy is an awesome way to really start developing these skills, because you have to start talking about yourself. And despite what people think, a lot of people talk about themselves, but they don't really say much. They might be talking about their to-do list. They might be talking about what's next on the agenda or their recent successes, but they're not really used to talking about their emotional life.
Exactly.
It's not completely socialized yet. So a great place to start, it's confidential, it's safe, is you can try therapy. Do you have other ideas for places that people, for if they want to kind of work on this in a safe place, understanding that they just might not be very skilled?
Well, first of all, there's a book, and Emotional Intelligence 2.0, and that has a quiz that goes with it. It's by the same people who did Strengths Finder 2.0, and it has a quiz with it, and you can start your journey with something like that, some sort of diagnostic tool. Knowing just that little diagnostic tool that we did tells me that, interesting, the difference between having compassion and actually being sad for themselves, sadness and compassion for others versus self. There's a facial expression there that I wasn't catching. And therefore what I would do, and I had an example of this today, what I did was I worked to alleviate their sadness, whereas trying to alleviate their sadness wasn't helping. They were sad for me. What would have helped better in that situation would be for me to ask a question and then reassure that my life wasn't damaged because of what occurred. But what I saw on the face, I thought was sadness, was really a deep compassion. And that just blew my mind. And I did the test. Like, wow, I read that all wrong. And that particular discussion ended in a quick exit. Yeah. So it's very helpful. The other thing is find a friend who just seems to be a little bit more tuned in. Going to therapy is absolutely wonderful and a great way to get tools, but you can also get tools by opening your eyes to the friends and the resources around you. Do you have any friends who seem to be able to read and know people? Do you have any friends who just seem like their self-management is really on point? Like they can really lovingly detach from whatever they're doing, saying, feeling at the time, make an evaluation and shift if need be. If you have any of those people in your life, those are really great resources. And another really great resource is just to Google emotional intelligence and dig in. There's so much information out there about emotional intelligence that you can consume, from videos on YouTube to short articles. You can start just looking into it, but what I recommend is that you look into it and you put it into practice. Look
Yeah,
into it,
absolutely.
put it into practice, because there's something that I call the learning loop, where it can be really interesting and really fun to learn, and then the application doesn't happen. So you know
Mhm.
all this stuff, but it's how do you apply it? How do you roll that out in your life? For example, the facial recognition, what I can take from that is, maybe all the time I don't know the emotion that's on the face. And maybe it's possible that when I see that, I can ask, you seem sad now. Are you sad?
I love that you did that. I love that you just made that shift, because to me, that is what emotional intelligence is.
Yeah.
Because 50% again is, hey, maybe I have this wrong. And sometimes emotional intelligence is just being able to recognize that I maybe don't know. And even when you're in a long-term marriage, or when you've been at a company for a long time and you're around people often, we do forget to ask questions. We do forget to investigate. We do forget to let it be okay if we're wrong. But that can cause so many issues, because in the assumption, I'm assuming, and the problem with assumptions is I have my own thoughts about what I've assumed. So I've actually created an entire emotional experience based on, it may not even be reality.
Right.
I can't tell you how many arguments I've settled between people where it was like, I got home on Tuesday night and they were in a bad mood. And all I do in the couple session is I look over and I go, is that true? Let's check it out. And the person goes, I was just tired. It was just a long day. And I mean, I really wasn't upset. And, the other person's like, yes, you were. And then they end up fighting for 2 hours over, you're upset. No, I'm not. You're upset. No, I'm not. And when you really come down to it, it's like, oh man, that can really get our relationships in trouble, a lot of entanglement, a lot of I know you better than you do, which is a fatal mistake.
Yeah.
We are constantly changing. There cannot be someone that knows me better than you may know my preferences, you may know my likes and dislikes, you may know some things, but on a day-to-day basis, you don't know my inner emotional life. And keeping tabs on that really is so important for intimacy.
Exactly. And it comes back to that courage to question, to having the courage to question, understanding that perception is reality. And there's a great mental model that is in a book called The Fifth Discipline by Peter Senge. And what this model says is that you observe things in your world, and you're like a video camera. You observe things in your world, but then what you do is you take those observations and you attach a belief to them. And when you attach that belief to them, then what you do is you make an assumption. You make an assumption about that belief. And if you do not check that assumption, that belief, what happens is you start looping
Mm-hmm.
until you go outside of that observational video camera. You really don't know. You really don't know. And it was really interesting in grad school doing an exercise around that, and doing an exercise around what is assumed and what is real. What is
Right.
observed, like the video camera, is not necessarily what is happening.
Mm-hmm.
So it's it's very important to question what you think you know, to question that observational um, aspect of, well, I saw you do this, and it must mean this. And so instead of questioning it like that, saying, when I saw you do this, I imagined this, or I felt this, and is that true? And just do a truth check.
Mm-hmm.
I see that, you look like you're tearing up. Are you sad? Is that true for you right now? Or is this conversation making you really sad? Or is there something else going on? And
Absolutely.
so here's the challenge with that, is that, and you mentioned this in the interview that's going to air with our guest, is that some people don't have the ability to identify beyond the four primary colors of emotions. There's the movie Inside Out that has joy and sadness and fear and anger. And they're the
Mm-hmm.
four primary characters and the four primary colors. But the range of emotion is so much deeper.
Oh,
And
yeah.
sometimes the level between sad and no, I'm just concerned for you is hard to discern in someone who hasn't discerned that for themselves yet.
Right.
So sometimes the questioning needs to go a little deeper than, are you sad? Because sometimes it can be like, well, I'm sort of sad, but and then how would you coach someone, Christine, into digging deeper to discover more complex emotions?
Well, if someone comes in and they really have a very low emotional intelligence, which happens a lot more often than you would think, children, teenagers, adults, it doesn't matter. I usually actually will print out an emotion vocabulary list. And you can find this all over the internet. And it just lists about 60 different words from, anxious, disgust, shame, embarrassed, all. And they're very subtle shifts, but they actually mean something very different. So we would usually go over something like that and then kind of talk about it. Like, hey, I usually will have them actually circle out of all these categories. What do you think you feel most in the last 2 weeks? And then that's one way we get to dive down. If someone is just circling the top four, I'll do that process with those four. Okay, well, you said you're sad. Here's 30 more words to describe sad. Let's get a lot more clear. And I usually am very clear on like, I can't help you unless I know, and I need to know to help you. So go through this process for me. And I usually kind of make it a little bit of a fun thing of like, well, I don't know, when you're angry, do you want to punch holes in walls? No, I want to cry in my pillow. Okay, well, that's probably something else. Let's keep going. And kind of sift through it. But once we get to identify vocabulary, which, yes, that is a mental tool, but it helps connect us with our emotion. And once we can play back and forth, that's the two words in the sentence, emotional intelligence. It's using those two parts of our brain and meshing. So now, not only can I feel it more fully, but I can express it and bring you into that. And so that's one process, is definitely clarity and clarifying, and then using more vocabulary and trying to kind of sift things out. We don't always know. Even with myself, I'll take a minute to digest something. I call it digesting. So it'll be like, I think I'm feeling frustrated, but hold on, what's below that? Oh, my feelings are actually hurt. I'm not frustrated at all. I'm just that like hurt my feelings. And now I have something to work with. So instead of going, you frustrate me, I can go, ooh, that thing you did really kind of hurt my feelings, and I'm feeling like I need some space from you because other things are coming up, right? But that again helps everybody. The person knows, oh, what I did, that was hurtful, and I'm also able to bring them in. Let's not do that thing that just happened anymore.
Right. I like that. Solutions. All about solutions.
All about solutions.
This has been Business Therapy, healing businesses from the inside out through communication and emotional intelligence. I'm Diane Dye Hansen, management consultant.
Christine Salvo, marriage and family therapist, certified mediator, and certified hypnotherapist. Have a great day. Thank you.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.